Backstage at the Universal Amphitheatre in Los Angeles, November 1993. Kurt Cobain stood frozen in the hallway, staring at a dressing room door. His hands were shaking. Not from nerves about performing, he'd played to millions by this point, but because behind that door was David Bowie, and Kurt was about to meet the man who had taught him that being different wasn't just okay, it was everything. What happened in the next 20 minutes would break Kurt completely, heal something deep inside him, and change how he saw himself forever. This is the story no one talks about. It was the final night of Nirvana's In Utero tour, and Kurt was exhausted. Physically, mentally, spiritually drained. The weight of fame had become unbearable. MTV wanted him to be a spokesman for a generation he didn't understand. The record label wanted more radio-friendly songs. Fans wanted him to be a savior. And Kurt just wanted to play music and be left alone. He was 26 years old and felt like he was drowning. That afternoon, Kurt's manager had casually mentioned that David Bowie was in town, recording at the same studio complex, and had asked if he could attend Nirvana's show that night. Kurt had said yes immediately, then spent the rest of the day trying not to throw up from anxiety. David Bowie wasn't just another rock star to Kurt. Bowie was the blueprint. The proof that you could be weird, vulnerable, and uncompromising and still matter. Kurt had worn out his cassette tape of Ziggy Stardust as a teenager in Aberdeen, playing it so many times his mom had threatened to throw it away. Now Bowie was here, at his show, wanting to meet him. The concert itself was a blur. Kurt played mechanically, going through the motions, his mind elsewhere. He kept scanning the crowd, trying to spot Bowie, wondering if he was really there or if this was some kind of joke. When the final song ended and Kurt walked off stage, his tour manager grabbed his shoulder. "He's in the green room. He wants to talk to you." Kurt's stomach dropped. He looked down at himself, ripped jeans, a stained flipper t-shirt, his favorite green cardigan with holes in the elbows. He hadn't showered in 2 days. His hair was greasy and tangled. This was how he was going to meet David Bowie, like a homeless person. But there was no time to change. Kurt walked down the narrow backstage hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. Other people passed him, crew members, hangers-on, people whose faces he didn't register. All he could think about was what he would say. How do you talk to someone who essentially created your entire artistic identity? When Kurt reached the green room door, he stood there for a full minute, just staring at the handle. He could hear muffled voices inside. He could turn around. He could leave. He could avoid this entire terrifying situation. But then the door opened from the inside, and there he was. David Bowie, 56 years old, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, his hair short and silver, looking like he'd stepped out of a different universe. And he was smiling. "Kurt," Bowie said, his British accent making the name sound elegant somehow. "I was hoping you'd come find me. I'm David." As if Kurt didn't know. As if the entire planet didn't know. Kurt tried to speak, but no words came out. His throat had closed up completely. Bowie's smile widened, like he understood exactly what was happening. "Would you like to come in? I promise I don't bite." Kurt managed a nod and followed Bowie into the green room. It was a small space, cramped and cluttered with equipment cases and half-eaten catering. Bowie gestured to a worn leather couch, and they both sat down. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Bowie leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "I wanted to tell you something," Bowie said quietly. "What you did out there tonight, what you've been doing for the past few years, it matters. More than you probably realize." Kurt finally found his voice, though it came out rough and uncertain. I mean, you're David Bowie. You changed everything. You're just doing what I did," Bowie interrupted gently. "Making people uncomfortable, refusing to pretend, showing them that the outsiders matter too." Kurt felt something crack inside his chest. He'd never heard it described that way. Everyone else told him he was the voice of a generation, that he represented something, that he had a responsibility. But Bowie understood that it wasn't about representing anything. It was about refusing to lie. "I don't know how to do this," Kurt said, and he wasn't sure if he meant this conversation or his entire career. "How to be what everyone wants me to be." Bowie studied him for a long moment, and Kurt saw something in those famous eyes: recognition, understanding, maybe even sadness. "Can I tell you something I learned?" Bowie asked. "Something I wish someone had told me when I was your age." Kurt nodded, unable to speak again. This was David Bowie, about to share wisdom with him, and it felt more surreal than anything that had happened in the past 3 years of sudden fame. "They don't actually want you," Bowie said. "They want the idea of you, the version of you that fits their narrative. And the moment you understand that, the moment you truly accept that you will never satisfy everyone's expectations, that's when you become free." The words hit Kurt like a physical blow. He felt tears starting to form and tried desperately to hold them back. He was not going to cry in front of David Bowie, not going to fall apart in front of his hero, but Bowie saw it anyway. Of course he did. "It's okay," Bowie said softly. "I cried for most of 1974. Fame is traumatic. It's supposed to be exciting and validating, but it's actually one of the most disorienting things a human can experience. Your entire identity gets scrambled." Kurt let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Everyone thinks I'm ungrateful, like I'm complaining about being successful. But it's not. It's not about the success. It's about feeling like I don't exist anymore. Like Kurt from Aberdeen died, and now there's just this thing that everyone projects onto." Bowie nodded slowly. "The person you were doesn't die. He just has to learn to exist inside a very strange new reality. And that person, the real you, he needs protection." "From what?" Kurt asked. "From everyone," Bowie said. "From the record executives who want you to make the same album forever. From the journalists who want you to explain yourself constantly. From the fans who want you to save them. Even from the people who love you, because they'll start to need the famous version instead of the real one." Kurt felt like Bowie was reading from his diary. Every fear he'd never been able to articulate, every desperate feeling he'd tried to explain to Courtney and Dave and Chris but couldn't quite express, Bowie was saying it all. "How did you survive it?" Kurt asked. The question came out desperate, almost childlike. Bowie was quiet for a moment, considering. "I created characters. Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, the Thin White Duke. I gave them the parts of myself I couldn't handle carrying. I let them be the stars while I stayed hidden." "But you can't do that forever," Kurt said. "You have to be yourself eventually." "Yes," Bowie agreed, "and that's the hardest part. Learning to be yourself after you've been someone else for so long. Learning to trust that your real self is enough." Kurt wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his cardigan. He felt simultaneously broken open and put back together. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can keep doing this." Bowie leaned forward and put his hand on Kurt's shoulder. The gesture was so gentle, so unexpectedly paternal, that Kurt felt himself starting to fall apart completely. "Listen to me," Bowie said, his voice firm but kind. "You are strong enough. The fact that you're questioning it, the fact that you're aware of the cost, that's the strength. The dangerous ones are the artists who never question, who just take and consume everything around them. You're not one of those." "Then what am I?" Kurt asked. Bowie smiled. "You're someone who feels too much, who cares too much. And yes, that makes everything harder. But it's also what makes your music matter. It's why people connect to it. They hear the caring, even when you're screaming." They talked for another hour after that. About music, about addiction, about the pressure to constantly reinvent yourself, about the loneliness of being surrounded by thousands of people who think they know you. Bowie told Kurt about his own darkest times, the periods where he'd wanted to disappear, the moments when fame had felt like a prison sentence. "It gets easier," Bowie said, as their conversation wound down. "Not easy, but easier. You learn to create distance, to protect the parts of yourself that matter most, to remember that the noise is just noise." Kurt nodded, not sure if he believed it, but wanting desperately to. Bowie stood up, and Kurt stood with him. For a moment they just looked at each other, the older artist who'd survived it all, and the younger one who wasn't sure he would. Then Bowie did something that Kurt would remember for the rest of his life. He pulled Kurt into a hug, a real hug, not the awkward side embrace of industry people or the brief pat of casual acquaintances, a full, tight hug that lasted several seconds and felt like being held by someone who genuinely understood. "You're going to be okay," Bowie whispered. "You don't feel like it right now, but you are. Just remember, the music is what matters. Not the fame, not the expectations, not what anyone else needs you to be. Just the music." When they finally pulled apart, Kurt was openly crying now, not even trying to hide it anymore. Bowie smiled that gentle smile again. "Would you like to know something embarrassing?" he asked. "What?" Kurt managed to say through tears. "I was nervous to meet you too," Bowie said. "I thought, this young artist who's actually saying something real, what if he thinks I'm a relic? What if he sees right through all my carefully constructed personas and realizes I'm just as scared as everyone else?" Kurt laughed, a real laugh, the first one in weeks. "You're David Bowie," he said. "You literally invented cool." "I invented a performance of cool," Bowie corrected. "There's a difference. And you, Kurt, you're not performing anything. That's your power. That's what terrifies people about you. You're actually real." They exchanged information before parting, phone numbers, addresses, promises to stay in touch. Bowie made Kurt promise to call him if things ever got too dark, too overwhelming. "I mean it," Bowie said seriously. 3 in the morning, doesn't matter. If you need someone who understands, you call me." Kurt promised he would. He meant it in that moment, though he knew himself well enough to doubt he'd actually follow through. The idea of calling David Bowie in the middle of the night felt absurd, like something from a dream. As Kurt walked back toward his dressing room, he felt different, lighter somehow, despite the heaviness of everything they'd discussed. Someone understood. Not just anyone, David Bowie understood. The person whose music had taught Kurt that being strange and vulnerable could be a kind of power, now telling him that he wasn't crazy for finding fame traumatic. That night, Kurt played an impromptu acoustic set for the crew still loading out equipment. Just him and his guitar, playing Bowie covers in an empty amphitheater. He played "The Man Who Sold the World," which Nirvana had covered, but also deep cuts like "Rock and Roll Suicide" and "5 Years." Songs about endings and survival and the cost of being seen. In the following months, Kurt and Bowie did stay in touch. Not constantly, but enough. Late-night phone calls where Kurt would talk about the pressure, the expectations, the feeling of being trapped. Bowie would listen and share his own experiences, remind Kurt that he wasn't alone in this strange, isolating experience. "It's a very small club," Bowie told him once. "People who've experienced this particular kind of fame. Most people can't understand it, but those of us in the club, we have to look out for each other." Kurt never forgot that meeting. Never forgot how David Bowie, one of the most iconic figures in music history, had taken the time to see him as a person rather than a phenomenon, had recognized the fear and pain underneath the success, had offered genuine understanding instead of advice, empathy instead of solutions. Years after Kurt's death, when David Bowie was asked about that meeting in an interview, he went quiet for a long moment. "Kurt was brilliant," Bowie finally said. "Absolutely brilliant. But more than that, he was kind, sensitive in a way that this industry eats alive." I tried to tell him it would get easier. I hope he heard me. I hope he knew that some of us saw him, really saw him, beneath all the noise. The meeting between Kurt Cobain and David Bowie backstage in 1993 was never publicized. No photos exist. No recording captured their conversation. It was just two artists at very different points in their careers, connecting over the strange shared experience of being simultaneously celebrated and misunderstood. But for Kurt, that 20-minute conversation mattered more than almost any other moment in his career. Someone he admired had seen him struggling and had said, "I understand. You're not crazy. This is hard." Sometimes that's all we need, validation from someone who's been there. Permission to feel what we're feeling. Proof that survival is possible. David Bowie gave Kurt Cobain that gift. And though Kurt's story ended tragically, those who were close to him in those final months remember that he would sometimes reference that conversation. Bowie said it gets easier, Kurt would say, like a mantra. He said the music is what matters. The backstage meeting between two of rock's most influential artists reminds us that even our heroes have heroes. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That the most meaningful connections often happen in the quiet moments away from cameras and audiences. And that sometimes being seen by the right person at the right moment can change everything. If this story of mentorship and understanding moved you, make sure to subscribe and share this video. Let us know in the comments if someone you admired ever gave you words that changed your perspective. And remember, the music is what matters. Everything else is just noise.